The Star and D'Amico Show is brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. If you're looking for quality gear without overpaying, check out cheapesttshirts.ca. A huge selection for men, women, and kids. Hoodies, t-shirts, headwear, bags, even towels. Get this. Order today, ship today, delivery tomorrow. Style, value, and speed, all with cheapesttshirts.ca. Brought to you by Cabletel. For reliable alarm systems in Quebec and Eastern Ontario, you can trust Cabletel, servicing the region for more than 20 years. Expert installation and top-tier protection for your home or business. Visit cabletel.com. Email them info@cabletel.com to get secure today. It's Cabletel. Peace of mind you can count on. Brought to you by Morella's. Craving unforgettable steak and fine dining? Morella's Steakhouse on Highway 132, 15 minutes from downtown Montreal, brings you premium cuts, bold flavors, and an atmosphere that's perfect for any night out. From exceptional service to an outstanding wine list, this is where great meals become great memories. Reserve your next night out and go to morellasteakhouse.ca to reserve now. Taste excellence tonight. Brought to you by Little Bear. Looking for the best for your pet? LittleBearOnline.com with online orders. They're also available on Uber Eats. It's a family-owned business in Montreal that's been around for more than 30 years. Chuck, Evie, and their wonderful staff have all your needs taken care of because they care about your pet as much as you do, with the best prices on top brands from around the world. Toys, food, bedding, everything your pet could ever want. LittleBearOnline.com or visit their store on St. Catherine across from Westmount Square. Brought to you by McLean's. Get down to McLean's Pub, 1210 Peel Street in downtown Montreal. It's your go-to spot for great food, cold drinks, and big sports on the big screens. Classic pub food and a lively vibe only steps from all the action. Stop by today at McLean's, 1210 Peel Street. Good times and great company. There's Marco D'Amico. I'm Sean Starr. Thanks so much for being with us. Don't forget, you can always like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find this show on all your favorite audio podcast platforms like iHeartRadio, Apple, and so on and so forth. We're still reacting to Ken Hughes' press conference, and how much, Marco, can we react and read into the general manager talking last week about the wants and needs of his team as they are more than, just competitive in the NHL's jam-packed, extreme parity-filled Eastern Conference, looking for physicality, looking for playoff experience. You and I spoke about Blake Coleman and the Calgary Flames. He checks those boxes. The age, the future remains maybe not the best fit. What about the element of what potentially could be out there in terms of checking those boxes that Ken Hughes is still having unchecked? The bigger player, the physical player, the experienced player. What's the landscape look like?
I mean, the landscape is developing slowly. Like we know that Sherwood is on the market. Coleman is a player that's drawing interest, but as I've said before, like the Canadians feel like this is what they need now to take the next step in not just making the playoffs, but winning a round. And I think if you think back to their series against the Washington Capitals, it was an area of need. And I feel like the Canadians have had the most amount of trouble this season against teams with big, rugged defense. You look at the St. Louis Blues games, it was very indicative. They had an incredible time trying to get around, Pareko, Broberg, Justin Falk, guys like that, Cam Fowler, experienced guys that have played in the playoffs outside of Broberg, in terms of experience there, but guys that have played in the playoffs, that play a physical game, that are big boys. You're going to want some sandpaper to come in and wreak havoc, especially on the forecheck and contribute offensively. And I feel like that's what, Marc Bergevin went out and did when he acquired Josh Anderson, for example, is he wanted to get that unicorn, as we call them, the power forward scorer that so many teams want. So that's where I feel like the Canadians are right now, be it a middle six forward, a top six forward. It all depends on the opportunity given, really. But that is definitely what I've heard the most right now is that the Canadians are looking to get that combination of grit and scoring. And again, they're not in a dire rush to do this before the trade deadline, but they're definitely going to be looking for that kind of profile.
Is it also fair to, as we have this conversation, as the trade deadline gets closer and closer, and obviously we're here talking before the NHL Olympic break, that the level of belief that that problem can be solved internally, and I think you know the player I'm talking about, and that's Florian Jacki with the Laval Rocket. Coming off a sensational year, scored more than 20 goals. You saw him in a small sample size with the Montreal Canadiens earlier this regular season. And I'm curious about not so much the timeline, but can that be a problem solved internally eventually? And is Florian Jacki maybe that guy? I mean, you dropped the word unicorn. That word was used to describe Florian Jacki, if memory serves. So let's
Mhm.
elaborate on Florian Jacki's future role, if there is one, within the Canadians organization.
I feel like unless they're really high end players like the Kachuk brothers, for example, at the top of a draft, i- it's difficult. It takes longer for those kinds of players to develop, and I
Right.
feel like knowing that, and the Canadians wanting to go out and get another piece is no indictment on Florian Jacki. In fact, you want more of the same a little bit here. The Canadians have made it very obvious. And if you look back to the two teams that Jeff Gorton has built up, in Boston and in New York, he always had pretty big bottom sixes, mean bottom six players. And you saw the kinds of players that he would draft, Will Cooley being an example of that. He likes those gritty, kind of no nonsense guys in the bottom six that are able to contribute offensively. In the height of the New York Rangers, that's exactly what they had, and they were running at you. Like, remember Ryan Callahan, like that kind
Sure.
of player, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about. And so in that sense, going to get a bigger, tougher player does not mean that you're necessarily stopping Florian from being able to make this team eventually as soon as next season. But I think what it does do is it takes a little bit of pressure off, because right now there are calls for the Canadians to get bigger, and everybody wants to call up a guy like Florian Jacki who maybe is not yet ready to play that role beyond simply just developing in Laval. And I think that's key. I think you should be able to dominate is a strong word, but I think you should be able to excel in the American Hockey League before coming over to the NHL and hoping to do the same.
Hmm.
And Florian, the organization appreciates him very well, and he is a coveted big left shot that can play center. So that's all good. But the Canadians are going to need to figure out the post Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher era on their bottom six. And so you're going to want to bring in a little bit of grit. You're going to want to bring in a little bit of sandpaper, and you're going to want to bring in guys that are going to be able to bring you that secondary scoring, because you look at last year versus this year, they're missing that right now, right? Like Yoel Armia not being there definitely hurts a little bit. I'm not going
Good
to say
point.
it's the end of the world, but it definitely hurts a little bit. That size, that shooting ability. Christian Dvorak, same thing. As much as we harp on it, and as much as I don't think it made much sense for the Canadians to give him $5 million to stay, you're still missing that element. So those are guys that were able to play physical, that had a good body of strength to them, that could play playoff style hockey, and you don't have that anymore. So you can't just fill your bottom six up with youngsters. There has to be a blend. And I feel like having a guy, or guys, depending on what the Canadians want to do, obviously, but having a guy that has that experience, that could take a line under his wing and kind of, bring some youngsters along with him, well, then that's an extremely valuable piece. And so that's the reason why you have an interest in a guy like Kiefer Sherwood, who does that in Vancouver from time to time, or Blake Coleman, who has a history of doing that, with the Calgary Flames of late.
I'm so fascinated, man, about, the timeline. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when Ken Hughes and Jeff Gordon and talk about and listen to them talk about their club this year. I mean, they are
Mhm.
one of the elite teams in the NHL's Eastern Conference, and I'm confident in my opinion that I don't feel that they feel that they're rushed. But at the end of the day, Marco, I would be lying to you if I said this team was perfect. If there is a small concern, yes, their speed, they're very, very quick. They're good in transition. They have multiple skilled players that can break open a game. We've seen it over the first half and a small sample size into the second half of the season, right? But there's something about my old hockey brain, brother, when I think about the playoffs and how tightly these games are played, how tightly they're officiated. And look, yeah, we could draw back to the 5 games last year in the playoffs against Washington, Marco, that if there is one concern about this club as they're currently built today is the question I have, are they playoff ready? Are they physically playoff ready today, Marco?
Playoff ready and contendership ready are two very different things, I guess.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that.
So I think that they can play in the playoffs. I think they all learned enough to be able to withstand that. I think that game against the Florida Panthers, yes, they were deprived of their top three players, four if you include Seth Jones,
Yeah.
but Florida's a very physical team, and Montreal did not back down. And
No,
so
they gooned it
there
up,
is that.
typical Florida style, right? Like they
Yeah.
started Sabrango, they started running around a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And so, with that said, I feel like the Canadians are a little wiser in that regard. Do I
Mhm.
think that they could match up? The Atlantic Division in general, outside of maybe Tampa and Florida, are not overly physical. Maybe throw Boston in there, but I don't think the Leafs are physical. I don't think that Detroit is overly physical. Ottawa, well, we'll see
Oh
about
boy.
them.
What about
Yeah,
Washington again? Washington again?
yeah, I know, but the way that the Canadians are playing right now, it may be. It looks like it'll be a divisional finish. It looks like they'll finish it in the top three of the Atlantic if things continue this way.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I don't think that it's as dire a situation as if you're in a wild card spot playing against some team in the Metro. But then again, I don't feel like the Carolina Hurricanes are an overly physical team either. So it
Mm.
will depend on who they play. Washington is a different beast because they're an older team, wiser team, and they have some big bodies, Protas, Wilson, you name it, right?
Yep.
But I feel like the Canadians would be able to hang because what they do better this year than they did last year, first of all, they're deeper. And secondly, they play much faster than they did last year. Last year, I felt like the top line played at a certain speed and that was it. Now you're seeing 2 to 3 lines being able to play with that energy on a consistent basis. And that's what makes them so dangerous of late. So I think that they could compensate for the lack of full lineup toughness for now, but it's definitely going to be something that needs to be addressed if they want to be able to contend down the line. But the Canadians are aware of this. Believe you me, they are aware of this. If guys like Sherwood and Coleman are on the market, heck, if a guy like Alex Tuck were to be on the market, the
Oh,
Canadians would be
oh,
all over those kinds of profiles. It doesn't mean that a trade would happen, but they would be in on those conversations because those are the kinds of profiles that
right.
they're missing. Um, but this also is not a must be addressed need by the trade deadline. As Kent Hughes has said, they're ahead of schedule. What does that mean? They have the benefit of or the luxury of time. They can take their time. They could be savvy. They could wait for the right opportunity, just like they waited for the right opportunity to get a bottom six center for a second round pick when those guys generally go for first round picks at the trade deadline in Phil Deneau.
So we spoke about earlier with Blake Coleman, the Calgary Flames. I mean, very quickly here, you think the Canadians would be as aggressive as to again put out another first round draft choice on the table in order to check that box of a playoff experienced guy and a player that comes with a good amount of credible physicality?
I think it would really, on paper, no. But the one thing we definitely do ignore when we do these kinds of analyses is the personal aspect of it. Like if there is if Kent Hughes and or Jeff Gordon have a personal liking to a certain player because of anecdotal stories or because of what they've seen in their in meeting the player in previous years or what they've heard from other execs, like that's a completely that's a unquantifiable aspect that we may not add to the equation here.
Hmm.
Then I could see them trying to, because you also want to properly surround your youth, but again, at the same time, you heard him say that they don't want to make rash choices that would block young players from being able to come in. So I think it has to be a good fit. It has to be a perfect fit. Like a lot of people were I'd say not happy about the Phil Deneau acquisition because of it would eventually force the Canadians to send down Owen Beck, who I think has been playing quite well. But I think Owen Beck could do with a little bit more seasoning in the American Hockey League. He's clearly improved, but if
Yeah.
he can bring that offensive game and be more of a shoot first, because he has a wicked wrist shot, he could be more of that shoot first kind of guy. He's going to be an NHLer all day, every day. So all this is going to do is put everybody in their right chair and afford them the right time to develop, and then you bring them up. So it remains to be seen on a lot of these guys. But what I would say is clear here is the Canadians have the luxury of time, have the luxury to be picky. And if the offer is simply is too much, they can walk away from it. Unlike, for example, Tom Fitzgerald in New Jersey, or,
Oof.
yeah, or
Yeah,
Brad Treliving right now in Toronto,
exactly.
like, or Ken Holland in LA. Like, these are teams that have to make the playoffs. So those are going to be teams throwing. Well, the Leafs don't have a first round pick this year or the next, but they're going to
No.
be throwing whatever assets they have to try and make these deals happen. There's going to be overpayment. Prices are ridiculous. And I just think that the Canadians are going to wait for the right opportunity. I would be surprised if they threw themselves at a player that aggressively, unless it was a can't miss kind of acquisition.
Desperation mode, in other words, for a bunch of other general managers in which the Canadians do not
100%.
fall into that category today. There's Marco D'Amico. Read all the latest as he covers the Montreal Canadiens like a blanket at rg.org. Marco, thanks as always, brother.
No problem, guys. Have a great one.